The internet, AI, it's logarithmic. So it's the learning curve almost becomes a vertical line.
Right.
And I think it's the same way as people said about 100 years ago, cars were just barely in existence. And now we've got rockets to go to the moon and to Mars. So again, it's early days, but I think space travel is going to be logarithmic. It's stepping stones to the moon, stepping stones to Mars, and then at some stage down the track, whether it be money thrown in or just more and more brains contemplating the possibilities, I think it's just going to, well, skyrocket.
This is the future.
Hello and welcome to the Alternate Futures podcast, where we chat with indie sci-fi creators about their work, the world, and anything in between, or beyond. Today I'm here with authors Peter J Aldin and A J Gordon. If Pete seems familiar, that's because he's been here before. You can learn more about him in the Alternate Futures podcast episode 30. But as a brief refresher, writing under both Pete Aldin and Peter J Aldin, Pete is the author of the Envoys trilogy, which spans 900 years of future history, the Doomsday Child series, and the werewolf thriller Black Marks. His story D is for Death, from the C is for Chimera anthology, was shortlisted for a 2017 Australian Shadows Award. He's also co-author of the Outer Reaches series, which we'll be talking about today. A.J. Gordon, very much like his alter egos Andre Jones and A.A. Jones, was born in Wollongong, New South Wales, Australia, and currently resides in southern France with his very understanding Scottish wife and a Jack Russell Terrier. As a child, he devoured many of the classics of fantasy and science fiction. As a young adult, he got lost in the many and varied role-playing games, including D&D and its many variants, and has spent far too much time on video games like Skyrim. He's worn many hats, including security officer, police officer, park ranger, and finally a petty officer in the Royal Australian Navy for 18 years. Author of the Seven Portals epic fantasy series and the urban fantasy series Deathwave Chronicles, Andre has recently turned some of his attention to writing space opera with the Outer Reaches series. Pete and Andre, thanks for joining me today.
Thank you, Edwin.
Thanks for having us.
So Andre, as I played tiny bits of D&D as a kid, but do you still play? And as I understand, the new rules have changed in an interesting way that some of the fans aren't very happy with. I wonder if you can sort of just share some of your thoughts on that and what it's like playing currently.
So I started 20 odd years ago. We started with basic D&D, and it's currently up to 5th edition 5e, which is vastly different. I think I've earlier on had a go at one of the third editions, but it still is quite good. I still play, but now that I'm in France and my cohorts in Australia, we have Zoom role playing, and which probably all started during COVID as well, because we still played but we couldn't get together. Anyway, I get up at 7 a.m. to start role playing, and they're relaxing after their evening in 6 p.m. in Australia. It's still good, still enjoy it, and but I couldn't give you any details as to the variations of all the different editions.
Right. So how many people do you guys have in the party then?
When they can all get together, 5.
You find it's almost the same being on Zoom, or do you prefer like live together?
Well, I prefer a live, but it's a hell of a commute.
Yeah, so. I can imagine. So you've had a number of different jobs, similar in nature: security officer, police officer, park ranger, military. What led you into that direction? Did you have a preferred one of those jobs, a preferred experience there?
I was in the Navy twice. So I joined when I was 19, and after 3 years, I was on an aircraft carrier that was decommissioned. My job was redundant, so I took the opportunity of getting out. And then from there, I rolled into a security officer job, which was interesting because it was a natural history museum job. And so you could read all the exhibits in the quiet times. You get to the rooms behind the exhibits to see how the curators are doing all their dioramas and how they're preserving the specimen, shall we say. And whilst I was there, I was around the corner from the police headquarters, so that was probably led to a consideration of joining them. But that was short-lived, only because, well, back in the day, they were arresting the wrong people, I think. They should have been arresting the people in uniform. So I got out of that. I did a few other jobs, council employee for a few years, and I ended up 13 years after I left, rejoining the Navy, which is started again from scratch and stayed there for another 15 years, 15, 20, 18 years.
Excellent. Did you have any night at the museum experiences from the movie?
Not quite.
No.
It wasn't a night shift job anyway. It was just a day shift.
So you missed all the good stuff then, probably.
That's it. Yep.
Okay. So I'm curious, you were in the Navy, were you, or military in Australia?
Navy is military.
Well, yes. Okay. Sorry. Ground or water.
That's all right. So I was on the aircraft carrier back in 1980. That was HMAS Melbourne for those that military historian buffs. And then when I rejoined, it was frigates. So I basically stayed on working frigates as an electronics technician.
Right, because there's in that part of the world, there's been an interesting news story in the last few months with the New Zealand Navy. I can't pronounce it, but the one that sunk. Yeah, the survey ship that they sunk,
yeah, Samoa.
Yeah, is there like a rivalry between the navies? Do you sort of take some Schadenfreude at the mishap?
There's always friendly rivalry. Mind you, they haven't got much of a navy to be rivaled at. So
there you go.
Now, I think the biggest between the three services in Australia, Army, Navy, and Air Force, the Army don't like us because we're called the senior service, and because it goes back to history where the UK, because we base everything on the UK model. The Royal Navy was the first military that was basically nationwide, whereas the Army had their various units, but they weren't a national body. And so as the military, as it progressed, the Navy became the senior service because we were the oldest in the UK. And because we're based on that model, we are the oldest technically in Australia. Army don't appreciate that. But we all have a go at the Air Force because nearly every Air Force base has a golf course. So to join the Air Force, you need to have a handicap.
Okay.
Playing golf.
I guess a place like Australia, the Navy would be pretty important anyway, wouldn't it?
Well, we have got a lot of coastline.
Yep. So Pete, not to leave you out of this conversation, it's been 2 years, almost exactly, I guess, slightly over 2 years since we last talked.
Yeah, it's crazy to think of that. Yeah.
Maybe you can update us on sort of what you've been. I mean, obviously you've been working on the Outer Reaches series, which we'll get to. But what else has been going on in your life?
Well, that's the biggest piece of the last couple of years, I think. About 4 months after I spoke to you, Dad passed away, which was a bit of a shock, and in some ways, although he was, he'd had 8 heart attacks before one finally got him, so he did pretty well. And it was, I thought I could just kind of soldier on in the wake of that, but it was actually quite hard to write. So I think writing with Andre was a real saving grace in terms of still enjoying the work and still producing something that eventually became something we were proud of once we'd polished it up. So not just dabbling. But there was a year there where it was actually quite difficult to sit down and focus. This year's been a lot better. I think a lot of authors would probably say that sales have dropped a bit in 2024. There's probably a lot of reasons why, some of them political. So I had to go back and do a little bit of work, but I'm sort of getting back into the groove again the last couple of months. So really, under my own name and without any involvement from Andre, there's only one book that I've put out since I saw you. last. Apart from a bit of dabbling under another pseudonym, which I won't reveal. Just to experiment and kind of keep the fun there and keep the talent and the skills alive. But yeah, looking forward to a new year and getting into some new projects and et cetera, et cetera. Yeah.
Excellent, excellent. Though there was one addition I noted to your bio on your website. It says, proudly 100% AI free, human words written by a human with cover art by human artists and voice production by human narrators. So with that obvious lead in, what are your thoughts on using generative AI in creative projects?
Yeah, I think the key word that you just said there was creative. I still firmly believe that creativity and art is the domain of human beings. That's not to say that software isn't there to assist us with it. Same as we're using a computer to communicate at the moment. Couldn't do that with that software, etc. I've used AI in that working space that I was just talking about. That was editing for a multinational company. So quite comfortable with doing that because you're already taking words that have been created and just finessing them, and sometimes shortening that process or seeing things in a different with fresh eyes. But yeah, still believe that voice artists and cover artists and writers deserve to own that space and be paid for the work that they do and the talent and the time they've put into it as well.
Do you think there is a place for generative AI in the author's workflow?
Look, I think there probably is. I think for people who are experiencing writer's block, it may be one of those things one of the tools that they can turn to get unstuck with that. So I'm not like thou shalt not, touch AI. I just think it's one of those things that I think we need to be wary of and not find it as the easy fix for everything. I think part of the joy of being an author is those hard decades of working really hard on your craft and getting that feedback from other human beings on, oh, that's not working, oh, that's working. Working out how do you fit a story within these parameters, how do you develop a character arc, et cetera, et cetera. That's part of what we do this for. So outsourcing that to a machine and then just coming in and doing whatever you do with that, I don't know. I'm still not comfortable with that totally. But I think as an editing tool, maybe, yep, there's a place for it. I've seen that. And again, maybe becoming unstuck in terms of writer's block. That's quite a helpful thing. I will be honest, and I have used Copilot quite a lot when I can't think of, what's that dish I had when I was in Singapore that time, or what would someone do in such and such a situation in the US? It's quicker than Googling, and sometimes the results are better than just Googling something. But to me, that's just the same as Googling. It's just a better version of that.
Yeah, I guess even the search engines now are creating AI summaries anyway of the search results.
100%. Yeah. So I've got to be careful not to be a hypocrite with some of that. But yeah, hopefully that makes sense, though, where I've kind of drawn that line for myself.
Yeah, I guess I can see that. Yeah. One thing I'm curious about, we'll get into this in a little bit more into the Outer Reaches series, but just while we're on the AI, I'm wondering, so you've written and with the Outer Reaches as well, so you can both comment on this. So your Envoy series covers 900 years, and the Outer Reaches series is like 5,000 years. Have you ever thought to try to use AI to fill in the timeline?
Not for me, no. I didn't really consider it. This 5,000 years is basically 5,000 years from now, but we've mentioned, without getting keyholed into a certain area or time, that there've been various wars. History repeats. You expand, places fall to the side. There's a bit of rebellion. So we've mentioned in passing various wars and skirmishes throughout the known galaxy at that time, but we haven't specified times, dates, and parties involved. We've just said, stuff happened in the past, and this is how it is now. Pete?
Right.
Yeah, and I see where you're coming from with that question. It would be an interesting exercise to do. I would probably do that just as a fun exercise,
Yep.
though. I think mainly because I enjoy. If we had to sketch in, a particular period of history, I would enjoy kicking that around with Andre until we come up with something ourselves. The difficulty is always keeping your world Bible straight, which
Right.
maybe there's a place for AI in keeping you, consistent to the history you've created and other details in your world. But
Yeah.
yeah, again, the fun is doing it ourselves, I think.
Yeah, what I could see is building up a huge amount of that, and then, because we always build the dramatic parts, right?
Yep.
So you build like the world Bible until you get to a certain point, then you could fill in like the nuances, perhaps if you
Right.
wanted to try it with the AI as well. Where do you keep your world Bible, by the way? Is it like on Google Docs or something, or
Dropbox, I think, isn't it?
just Dropbox? Okay.
Yeah, the one that we share is a Word document on Dropbox, and it's not in very good shape.
No, we tend to get carried away with the writing, and then we go, oh, maybe we should have to go back and find these things and put that in the Bible because we forget. Just if I may, getting back to the AI, total agreement with Peter that it's good for getting out of to get an idea of where to go. But what the only thing that we've really used it for, or I've used it for, is concept art. So when we had to explain to our publisher what the ship looked like, what the characters looked like, it's hard to say, oh, a blonde, big boobs, big butt, or whatever. So you just
Got to watch
use a
that. You're
bit
going
of
to get me shut down here with those kind of comments. We're not in Australia anymore.
And we didn't say that, by the way.
no, that's right.
Just an example.
It was just an example. That's right. So we use some concept art just to get the impression of what we felt our characters should look like, but none of that was used in any of the artwork of our books.
Right. Okay.
And
Yeah.
Peter, I've used all real voices and the real artists for my covers as well.
Yeah, I do find for concept art to be quite good. I'm not very good at visualizing my characters
Yeah.
In my head. So if I can get something generated that, oh, that's what they look like, that looks good, then yeah, I find it quite helpful as well. I also like to create settings, and then I find it easier to describe them if I can see them on the screen, for example.
I have a Google image of the Milky Way galaxy, I suppose, and where the major stars and constellations are pictured. And I refer to that a lot so that we know where our various in the Outer Reaches books where the sectors are that we've slowly moved across. And the sectors, especially in the earlier stage of hyperspace travel, because hyperspace wasn't great. There's smaller sectors, but as hyperspace has been developing, the sectors become bigger and bigger. And they're not always right next to each other. So sometimes there might be, I know, sector 7 here, sector 8 over here, but sometimes in between there might be a different sector. We haven't really mapped it out in great detail. We just refer to the images as a guideline.
It is fairly
Again, not getting keyholed in any particular area.
Yeah, it's fairly challenging to map out a galaxy, isn't it?
Oh, yeah.
With the 3 dimensions and this vast scope and everything, yeah. So we'll definitely get onto a lot of that in a moment. I just wanted to wind it back a tiny bit to Andre and your path to writing. And so from your various officer type jobs, how did you then decide to move into? And again, you're primarily fantasy writing. Is this your first science fiction foray?
It's the first space opera, more soft sci-fi, I suppose. What would you call it, Peter? Hard sci-fi, soft sci-fi?
Oh, it's soft sci-fi.
Yeah. Okay.
A little bit of science fiction, yeah, but not much.
So with my fantasies, I just love both of them, and so there's always a little bit of sci-fi elements in there as well. But how I got into it was, well, I was bored. I on the ships, I was bored. So I had with the role playing. After a while of role playing, you think, oh, that's a stupid rule and that's silly. I can come up with my own rule. So you come up with your. I designed a role playing system and some player characters we had some friends to do the play testing, and we got to that stage. So I had a world, I had a history, I had characters, religions, and then I joined the Navy the second time, and you couldn't really role play on a ship. So, but I had this image, this story in my head for a year. So I thought, you know what, I'm going to write it, and so that's how the Seven Portals came out, because I had to get this. The first book I was ever going to write, the first and only book I was ever going to write, and I didn't like English at school, so it had to have everything that I wanted to write, that I like to read about in it. So it had my fantasy world. I like the concept of a dystopian future Earth. I like time travel. I like paradox. It became bigger than one book. So, but basically, I got into it because on the ship, a lot of quiet time, and I started writing. And it was, as any first-time author would tell you, it's you lack confidence, you think it's crap, and you keep plugging away at it. And I hate to say it, that 25 years later, I published the first book, and then because it was in my head for so long, it only took me 6 months to write the other 3 books.
Oh, excellent. Yeah.
And that was during COVID when I was retired. So plenty of time, bit of money, nothing else to do.
So the 25 years for the first one, then, how long did it take you to write the story and get it prepared to a level that you liked? And then from that point, how long did it take you to actually publish it?
We had lockdowns around 2020. So it was late 2019. Anyway, so I wrote the first draft. Like I said, it had been worked on for a long time. It was actually 130,000 words. And the advice from various people was that for a first-time author, 130,000 words is probably too much, too big. So maybe reduce it. So I found a section in there which was a reasonable time to finish. I tidied up the end, culled about 35,000 words, and the good thing about that was that became 35,000 words into book 2, which I added another 100,000 words to, and then it led into book 3. But have to understand that whilst the words weren't written, a lot of the information had been in my head for so long that it was, other than the minor details, the broad picture was already there. So I just had to put it down on paper. So they're all professionally edited through a lady in the UK, and so it took me just on 6 months to write and about 8 months to get them all published.
That's pretty good speed, yeah.
Well, I had, like I said, lockdown, nothing else to do.
Yeah, people either turned off during lockdown or got going. One of the two.
Well, I wrote 6 books in the 2 years, so
yeah, obviously the second one. So how did that set you up then? Because you managed to basically publish a number of books very close together. That must have been quite good for the marketing as well then, because that is sort of a kind of recommendation, especially for new authors, publishing trilogies. And we'll get into sort of your publisher with the Outer Reaches, I guess. But did that work well for you then? Did you put you on the stage?
No, not really.
No? Okay.
I suppose because it was my first time effort, I was new at advertising, a lot of social media stuff. So I didn't have any, big book launch. I suppose what I should have done was had them all written first, and then had a formatted sort of release. But all I did was I just wrote the first book and just put that out straight away. And then I started writing the second book, and I put that out as soon as I finished that. So there wasn't any big fanfare. It was just, hey, I've written a book. Here we go. A bit like 90% of the other indie authors, I suppose, first time. So I mean, yes, I had some success, but not what I would call, I mean, I'd already retired, so that was lucky, but it wasn't enough to decide that I was going to be a full-time author without relying on my pension.
Right, right. And so, well, we're moving into, I guess, into your Outer Reaches trilogy right now. How did you guys, how long have you known each other then? And how did you meet up for this? And what made you decide to start writing this series?
You want to say this, Peter, or?
Yeah, I'll jump in first. We we bumped into each other at a few conventions in Melbourne, Victoria, Australia, over maybe the last decade, maybe.
It was was it Conflux? What was the one at Jasper Hotel in Melbourne?
Yeah.
Was that Conflux?
But probably 2016.
Yep.
We first met, and we just kept bumping into each other occasionally. Then we got talking about stuff. Conventions in Australia are very, very small, and that particular one is tiny. There'd probably only ever be about 80 or 90 people at that, so it was hard not to bump into each other.
Or avoid each other.
Or avoid each other. Yeah, no, I can't quite remember what kicked off this idea for this. I know it was your idea to begin with, Andre. So can you remember how we wound up writing this project or experimenting with it?
Well, I wanted to get into it, and you had, with your envoys, had more experience with the sci-fi genre. So I suppose it's piggybacking off each other. We both wrote half a book, and we benefited from that. But and I don't think I was backward in saying that. Obviously, because you had the experience, I was relying, I suppose, more on your expertise and your foothold in the genre than going from my experience from fantasy writing and not having anyone to back me, shall we say. I was piggybacking off Peter's great reputation. So I had this. I love Firefly. And so I had this idea of a Firefly type crew, and but I just wasn't confident, I suppose, that I could carry it myself. And then I just put the question out to Peter if he was interested in it. And as it turned out, Peter had some idea but wasn't sure where to go. Over to you, Peter.
Yeah, when we started talking, what we decided to do was let's try, instead of writing the same characters at the same time, let's start with two different teams of characters and have them on a sort of concurrent journey until they eventually collide, and then we'll work out how to kind of mesh their stories together. And that was the tough bit for the second half of that novel. But I thought, right, if I'm going to write something for this, it needs to be not the same kind of characters as Andre's writing. So, Andre's group are that kind of Firefly. Can I say escaped slaves, Andre? Or they've had an experience of slavery, haven't they?
Well, that's right. Yes. So they were just a mismatched group that were in a slave pen, but technically they had not been slaves. They were going to be sold as slaves, but they managed to escape somehow, and then things just progressed.
We decided. I think the only idea we had at the beginning was that there was going to be a ghost ship, and they were all going to arrive on this ghost ship at roughly the same time and converge on each other, and then to have to decide whether they were friend or foe. So the group that I had was the more coming from the Imperial side of things, so the more official, rulers of the galaxy. But once again, I thought I don't just want a bunch of faux stormtroopers, Star Wars stormtroopers. So we decided on a group of soldiers who were from like 1.5 millennia earlier, who'd been on the losing side of a civil war that had created a lot of mayhem in the galaxy. And they'd surrendered, and part of their punishment was that they had to then serve the Empire. So they would go on missions, get put into stasis, into cold freeze. pulled out in 100 years or 80 years or 400 years for another mission, and off they would go. And slowly over the centuries, their numbers have been dwindling, so there's not too many of them left. So we thought that kind of added an interesting backstory to that set of characters and set up some conflict within that Imperial team that was before they even met Andre's characters. But that was kind of the nuts and bolts of where we started with it.
Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, you might have to be careful. I can almost, like with your mention of the stormtroopers, I can almost see Disney looking at this and saying, yeah, that'd be good for the Star Wars if we move it like 1,000 years in the future of the sequels kind of thing.
Even though it is Disney, I wouldn't argue with that.
What I was going to do is just try to read the bit of the blurb for the first book, give people an idea. Try to do it in a dramatic voice, maybe. I will see. And then we can move on, because I'd like to also discuss sort of how you structured it as well. But all right, so the first book is The Outer Reaches. Book 1 is called Iconic, which is named after, or should I say what it's named after, or is that a spoiler? I think it's not a spoiler, right?
Not at all.
No, so it's named after a spaceship, basically, isn't it?
Yeah.
All right, so the blurb goes like this. Try my dramatic voice. For 3,400 years, we conquered the Milky Way, ushering in an age of peace and prosperity, all of humanity united beneath the banner of Martianist Imperium, until civil war struck at the Empire's heart. 1,700 years after the war, the Imperium is a shadow of its former self. Along the galaxy's outer reaches, frontier factions and vicious gangs nip at the Empire's heels and jostle for dominance. So hopefully I did that justice. I'll leave it there without introducing the two factions, but they're in the blurb as well. So that was an interesting way for you guys to set that up, because I often wonder how people will co-author. But so what you've done is you've co-authored the first book. I imagine you each wrote the segment that you identified with, as it were, and then you've each written one full book after that in the series. Is that right?
Right. Yep.
Correct.
So Pete started off with the prologue to sort of set the scene, which was, I suppose, the beginning, the earliest stage of the current Imperium. So I won't go into too much detail. I'll let Peter do that. But then once that was done, it just went back and forth. So I wrote chapter 1, Pete wrote chapter 2. So my group had no idea of where they were going, what they were doing, and Pete's group were in a similar way. So we just went backwards and forwards, slowly progressing towards the culmination of our meeting the first time. But that wasn't until about chapter 15, chapter 16. So it was him, me, bit of us, and then a complete blend. And sometimes there's chapters where they're not involved, but they're in the background. So it's all my group doing certain things. But the Iconic is a massive ship. And so we could be on the same ship, but doing totally different things.
Did you ever have to write each other's characters? Because I've done some campfire stories where we kind of sort of each person continues on a different chapter. And sometimes it's quite interesting to see how the other person interprets the characters you've created. Did that ever come up, or did you always write your own characters?
No, as we got into that second half of the book, we did have scenes, particularly where there were scenes where we had each other's characters in that scene. So it has to be from one character's point of view in a chunk of the scene or the chapter. Again, my memory is that we would write it, do our best to be true to that character's voice, the other guy's character's voice, and then double check it with them. So we were constantly, well, not constantly, but we were quite often editing and re-editing each other's scenes, particularly if our characters were in there. And occasionally we might say, "Oh no, I don't think they'd do that," or "No, he's not dressed like that," or "He doesn't have that." Those kind of things too. A lot of where I needed to be careful was each of Andre's characters has a very distinctive voice and way of speaking, and almost frame of reference that comes through the way they speak and act. So it actually, in some ways, that made it actually easier for me, because I was already quite familiar with the characters, but I still had to be really careful to make sure I was true to that. And that was probably one of the reasons why we wanted to sort of split it again in the next 2 books, as well as it being quicker to write that way too. Yep.
Right. So you acted as each other's continuity editors for at least for the first series anyway. Yeah.
Very much so, yes. And then with the sequels, we did the same thing. We just double checked in with each other. Or could we do that? Have they done that in this universe? Does this fly? Is this okay happening at this point in history?
Yeah, we just didn't want to do things that was going to contradict or conflict with something that was happening elsewhere. Now, hang on, how could they be doing that here when that's happening there and at the same time? But yes, as you say, we wrote. Pete wrote Coauthor and I wrote Far Horizons. Other than reading each other's work and maybe making a bit of comment, we really didn't have much involvement with each other's book.
All right. For the time checking, did you do it as the writing was going on, or was it sort of like a finished product? Here, check this. Oh no, the timeline's wrong, kind of thing.
My memory is both.
Both. Okay.
Yeah. We kind of got to the end of it, and then we actually paid an editor to polish it up a bit, and then we had another look at it and went, ooh, there's a big chunk in the middle that things don't fly. Because again, there's one scene in particular, I don't know if Andre remembers this, but in the mess hall, we have a scene where gravity goes off, gravity goes on, gravity goes off, gravity goes on, lights go on, lights go off. And we were just getting in a real muddle as to, hang on, is the gravity on, but the lights are off now? Is the lights are off? So that probably went on, again, on and off for months, I think, where one of us would realize we'd have another look at it and go, oh no, we've got the wrong thing on.
So how long did it take you to put together the first book then, with this back and forth?
Close to a year, I think.
It was a bit more, probably 18 months. Yeah.
Yep. But at the time, we hadn't considered any more books. We thought, well, it would have been a hope, but the publisher at the time said, yeah, great, we'll take it, but series do better. So can you come up with another book each? So we, and they basically kick off straight after the first book. So the actions that because we said straight away from the publisher that the two parties were so different, even though they could work together on a common mission. It's not like they were buddies and could just rock up together. Because you had imperial officers on shall we say, a rebel ship, because they basically left the Imperium. And well, I've already had a captain on the ship. So you've got a rebel captain and an Imperial officer, and it's like too many chefs. So we thought this is not going to work out. So we said to our publisher, after this book, both parties will go their different ways. And he was fine with that, but he still wanted another book each. That's why Pete wrote Coauthor, because his group was off doing their thing, and that's why I wrote Far Horizon, because my group was carrying on with their thing.
Yeah, I noticed that. So you guys are published through Chris Kennedy Publishing, and it's the Theogony imprint. I looked at the author submission, and yeah, they actually just state in there, new authors do best with trilogies. So they basically give the impression they only accept trilogies to be published fairly quickly after each other. What's been your experience with that publisher?
Hey.
I'll jump in, yeah, because I'd already had a book published with them. My experience with them has been sensational. Sorry if you can hear my dog barking in the background. Always very, very easy to communicate with. They know their stuff. They've got a very devoted following in terms of audience. So a lot of people read their newsletters, are looking for the next book, et cetera, et cetera. So yeah, very, very happy to work with Chris and the team there.
And the key thing, I guess, is often also the marketing is a lot of people look at. So have they provided a lot of marketing support for that? You mentioned newsletter, but did they have a lot of stuff beyond that? Or?
A lot, and we're probably not aware of everything they've done. One, I don't know for Andre, for myself, coming from the indie space and having published over 10 books already on my own, it was quite difficult to just let go, but it was also quite liberating just to think, I don't have to think of the cover art. I don't have to pay for the cover art. I don't have to wait for the cover art to turn up. I don't have to, et cetera, et cetera.
Definitely cheaper.
Yes.
Well, in the short term, it was cheaper because obviously we didn't pay for the editing or the cover art, and or any of the other details. We just wrote the book and sent it off, and they dealt with it. And it's not a Chris Kennedy issue. It's just if you're an indie author and you've got a publisher elsewhere, especially maybe small press as opposed to a big one of the big traditional publishers. Being overseas, it's very hard to get author copies. You've got to pay for the, apart from just paying for the initial printing costs, to get to Australia, for instance, it almost doubles the cost. So if you're one of those authors that likes to go to markets and fairs and you want to have a physical copy in your hand, then you can do that, but you probably, unless you make the book very expensive, which no one's going to buy, you really don't make much of it.
Right.
So that's the only drawback. If you're going to be an indie author and you get a publisher, try to be in the same country.
So one of the benefits then for Amazon or Ingram Spark or something, since they have regional printers everywhere.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, if I can just jump in, I had someone bought some of my other books, which I self-published, and worked out that they were in London or in the UK. So, and then I realized I could contact Ingram Spark in the UK. They printed them off and posted them to a local address. And obviously the cost was far less than what it would have been if I printed them in Australia and then sent them over.
Right. So Chris Kennedy is US based then? Would that be?
Correct.
Yeah.
US based, correct. Yeah. Can I just jump in and just say one other thing, just while I'm thinking of it in terms of marketing? One thing I've learned from the way they do things is the power of advanced reader copies, which is not something that I've ever really done, and I'm realizing I should have. So we had reviews very, very quickly up on Amazon, and I think that's just massively important, and positive reviews too, which is important to say. I think that's massively important just for authors to get traction early on a book. So that'll be definitely something that, just the things that we and I independently publish, I'll definitely be looking at that more in the future.
Mm-hmm. Me too.
Right. Do either of you have significant email lists then?
I keep culling mine because I keep getting told, I won't say the phrase that I keep getting told, but the people who aren't opening your emails, you shouldn't have them on there. So I sort of, after a while, give people a bit of a chance. I'll send them a separate newsletter to say, hey, it doesn't look like you've been opening the emails for a while. If you'd like to stay on the list, just shoot me a reply. If you don't, I'm going to take you off the list. So I'm continually culling mine. So mine sort of sits around 100 to 150. It seems to just stay there, but the engagement's pretty high, which I'm happy with.
And on the reverse, I started getting recipients for newsletters through BookFunnel, and very quickly found out that they were through those free promos. And sad thing is that I found out if you weren't giving a free book, they weren't interested. And so a bit like, and again, there wasn't much engagement. So I thought, you know what, we work hard enough to get a book out there, let alone just giving it out for free. So I just thought, a bit like Pete, did some ruthless culling. So I also hate newsletters. I'm not a newsletter writer. Maybe it's something, again, once you've done it a few times, you might get better at it. But I just very rarely wrote a newsletter. So I sort of let it die a bit. But I still know who the good newsletter recipients are. So one day they'll find a surprising email.
Well, you could always start a podcast or maybe a D&D style game channel based on your Outer Reaches series.
Well, okay, Outer Reaches. I mean, as I said, my fantasy books started off as a role-playing idea. So who knows? Somewhere down the track, they might come out as a role-playing game.
Excellent. Yeah.
Hint, hint.
Shall
Any sponsors out
we
there?
watch this space?
Yep.
So Andre, what was the your experience in, because you're primarily fantasy writer, shifting from fantasy to science fiction, did you find similarities? Because Orson Scott Card basically says they're essentially the same. You can tell which one's science and which one's fantasy by the cover, basically. So,
Well, I didn't, because I love science fiction as well. It's just that I haven't had the experience in putting it in on paper. I didn't think it was difficult, but again, I think that yes, there is distinct differences between science fiction and fantasy, but I love them both, and I just I enjoyed it. I didn't really have too much of an issue with it.
so I mean, what I guess one is set with trees and one is set on spaceships, more or less, right?
Well, there is that, yes. And was it Heinlein that said that magic is just about the technology far removed?
Oh, Arthur C. Clarke, possibly.
Arthur C. Clarke, sorry.
So into the series a bit more then. Well, first off, one last question. If I want to, I have ideas, too many ideas, but I have projects that I'd love to have co-authors on. Where would you recommend trying to, I mean, you guys found each other back and forth, meeting each other a lot at conventions. Thoughts on, is that the best way? Just go to a lot of small conventions and try and meet the same people? Or do you think there's do you think there's a better way?
I would say one of the reasons we wrote so well together was because we'd been beta reading each other's other books for a couple of years, I think. So Andre had helped me kind of polish up my first forays, even though I'd been dabbling in sci-fi for a very long time. I hadn't really put out anything. I'd focused on the zombie stuff and a few fantasy short stories and some horror short stories before that. So we had, I think that was part of the reason that we'd come to understand how each other worked and had that mutual respect for each other and the craft that we were capable of. I'm a big fan of writing groups. I think, and there's plenty of them online as well as local ones. And you'll always, get into a group of people and meet someone who annoys you, for sure.
Mm-hmm.
But you're also going to meet people who become great friends, like we have been, and some of my other best friends have come through writing groups. So I personally think that's where you've got the potential for finding those writing buddies, because you're actually getting to know how they work and they're getting to know how you work. And when you're giving each other feedback, you've already developed a language so that you understand that the other person's being constructive and respectful, if that makes sense.
Yeah, so you had a feel for each other's writing style and also critiquing style and sort of workflow kind of thing. Yeah.
Much
Yeah,
better so.
I think you need to know the other author fairly well just to understand that you're both, because in essence it's a business deal, and you don't want to go into a business where someone that you're not too sure about the consequences. So, but I knew Pete. Pete knew me. We knew we're on the same page, and we had no major issues. But I can understand that if you meet another author and you have a quick, let's co-author a book, and then halfway through it you realise that you're really not on the same wavelength. There could be a waste of time, and maybe the downfall of a otherwise potentially good friendship.
It's well said. To compare, I've just started working with a screenwriter to adapt one of my books, and at the moment we're just experimenting with it. But he was someone that I'd met through a mutual friend. It wasn't the same trust relationship as I have with Andre, let alone knowing how each other worked. So we went down the line of having a memorandum of understanding, basically a contract, before we even entered into the work together. So hopefully, and we're enjoying working together. That's fine. It seems to be working out pretty well. But yeah, if that makes sense, Andre and I had that advantage of having known each other for a while and gradually coming to have that rapport and understanding. So,
yeah, I think it's important that what you said about the business relationship. You have to approach it that way, don't you? So you're also going to be working with someone who feels like they're on a similar level to you as well, right? You're not going to go after like working with a Stephen King or J.K. Rowling or something, right? They're just not going to be interested generally.
They would be so lucky.
Yeah, so moving into the Outer Reaches series then. So it currently stands as a trilogy. I mean it's all right, so it's 5,000 years in the future. So Pete, first of all, you have the Envoy series, which is 900 years. You've got this one of 5,000 years. You seem to have a thing for expansive science fiction series. Is that just
Far future.
yeah.
Yeah.
Is there a reason
This
for
one was
that?
more. Well, I think this one we just wanted to set it in, far enough distant that it could be whatever we wanted it to be. So there was a little bit of Dune influence in that, possibly. That idea of humanity existing so far in the future. But we also sort of thought, well, we want to have something that's obviously recognizable, whereas Dune, something like Dune is not quite as accessible to people easily. So we created an imperium that had lasted for millennia, that had basically kept things fairly stagnant. But I think we get into this for what's novel and interesting and different, and that just is probably why we do that. It just gives us that scope to create whatever the heck we want, and it makes sense within that that universe that we've created.
I mean, clearly with 5,000 years of space, well, space time to cover, it does leave itself open for a heck of a lot of stories. Do you see this series going in a lot of different ways? I mean, you guys could literally write anything throughout that whole period if you wanted. Is that something you're considering, or are you kind of comfortable with the trilogy at the moment?
Well,
For the time being, we'll probably stick with the trilogy. But yeah, Andre's been working on some things that I've started to get involved with too. Sorry, Andre.
That's all right. So I thought I had an idea for origins. So where are these characters? Where do they come from? So it was nothing concrete yet. So my major characters, um, Alexis, Philip, Raiden, Sabria, and Torg. I was trying to come up with about 15 odd thousand words, basically describing what led them to the position where they were at the beginning of the book. How do the botanists become a starship captain? Where did the Torg as an android? Where did he come from? How did my mechanic extraordinaire Braden get there? Why did they become slaves, basically? And meet up together. Sabria is probably my favorite character. There's a video game called Unreal Tournament.
Oh, yeah.
And I know there's an Unreal Engine which does a lot of graphics, but there was Unreal Tournament, and it's far future. Gladiator warfare is more lucrative than mining, and so a lot of the mining companies went into using their tools and equipment to go gladiator style. And so I've called mine Surreal Tournament instead of Unreal Tournament, but it's basically the same thing. And she's a warrior, so she's got augmentation, nanites keeping her going, and she saves the day quite a lot. But then again, she uses brute force, and sometimes there's a couple of times when just smarts and luck get him through instead. So that was the origin idea, but Far Horizons finishes with them about to set off on another trip. But I've got other things in the process as well, too many things. So that's been put on the back burner for a while.
Excellent. Yeah, I was wondering if there was an Unreal Tournament influence in there. I've also was inspired to write a novel. Well, I wrote a whole novel based around Unreal Tournament, which I'm revising multiple times. But
yeah,
so I was wondering if there was influence there.
It sort of works in with the Imperial, which is a Roman-based Imperium. So they have gladiator schools and stuff. So I thought it worked with that well.
Right, excellent. Torg, where did you get the name for Torg? I'm just curious.
It sounded androidish,
Okay.
but in the origins, I've had to come up with a why. And at the moment, it's the work in progress is it's tactical observer robotic guardian, because somewhere in the far horizons, he starts getting a bit more. Well, he's not CP30. He actually starts getting a defensive, being aggressive in defense, protective. And I thought I tried to work out in the back history what was he originally, and he wasn't always just a server bot. He wasn't just a ship's droid. That's his cover. And so he was something far different beforehand, but events led that a sub-program has taken over, and his original programming is ready to be released if certain things happen. And where he attacked a killer robot 5 times his size, it sort of hinted at he's not exactly what he seems. So it was initially an anagram. Anagram, is that the right word? Acronym.
Okay, interesting. Yeah. So it sounds, first of all, like you've got a lot of stories potentially lined up, or at least in your head, buzzing around there.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. The reason I asked about Torg is because again, a book I drafted some time ago. I use the same term, interestingly, for android creatures. I just call it transorganic, so that's where I got Torg from. So
that's not in print yet, is it? Okay.
So it was interesting. Right. When I saw that, I'm like, oh, interesting. So something I thought was interesting in this story, you've each so you're 5,000 years in the future. You've got the new the collapsed Imperium, and then the new political structure. But you've both chosen at least partially characters from the past to challenge in the future. I thought that was a bit of an interesting metaphor. I think, if I'm not mistaken and remembering correctly, one of Andrea's, I think it'd be more yours were more, yeah. You had one from the past as well, did you not, Andrea?
Yeah, but only about 40 years previous.
Right, so not so far past. Okay.
No.
Okay, I was a bit confused, to be honest, on that part, because I wasn't sure how far back that character went.
So if you're talking about my character, Alexis, she was born on Mars, and she was going out to a colony world, a high gravity colony world. She'd been augmented to survive on that. And she was in stasis for the trip. Again, it was not the best hyperdrive situation on her ship, and so it was slower than some others. It was in a region that was unknown. So the way I've foreseen hyperspace travel, they have way stations which are situated in hyperspace, and when you're traveling long distances, the way station it's like a navigator, it's like a beacon, and so your ship's computer communicates with it, and it says everything's clear, so you're right to go to the next place. But when you're going to unknown territories, your jumps are smaller, and so it can take longer. So if you traveled in the Imperium, and this is not necessarily written down anywhere, but if you're traveling through the Imperium, it's all known space. There's very good way stations throughout, and so you can go through major trade routes quite quickly, covering vast distances. But when you're on the outer reaches and it's less known, there's more space anomalies, unknown stuff, so it's slower. So she was in stasis for 20 odd years, traveling to the planet she was going to, the colony world, and then her ship encountered our mysterious ghost ship, and basically she was put back into stasis for another 20 odd years. for various reasons, and then she was finally found as wreckage in the wreckage, and a bit like I suppose Sigourney Weaver in one of the Alien movies, where she was found years later, but in this case she was found by salvagers who were trying to make ends meet, so they decided to sell into slavery.
So what was it interesting to both of you, taking characters from the past and bringing them into in one case, massively updated future, maybe. It depends how collapsed the civilization was, I guess. What interested you about that sort of approach?
For me, sorry.
Sorry.
Well, one of the things I'm always interested in is languages, and one of my bugbears with shows like Stargate SG-1, which is my favorite sci-fi of all time, but you travel around several galaxies and everyone speaks English, and it's like, hang on a second. So giving the characters the problem of they don't bother learning the lingua franca of any particular period that they emerge to, because it might be 2 or 3 or 4 or 500 years between outings from stasis. So they have to stick to there's an unchanging imperial language, which is basically Latin, just a form of Latin that never changes. So they've gotten very good at speaking that. They also have their own language that they speak between themselves, but they can't communicate easily with the people so they never quite connect with anyone during any mission except each other. So it kind of continues to form that bond between them, because they really are all they have. But I also think one of their things is that they can comment on, the more things change, the more they stay the same. But we've seen this behavior before, or this little cultural tick before, 400 years ago, and then it changed for a while. Now it's back in fashion again, too, which is what happens with us. The more things change, the more they stay the same. We've got the same political problems today as we've had in the past, and the same opportunities today as we've had in the past. Pandemics come and go. By the time the next one rolls around, we think it's something new, but it was here 100 years ago, et cetera, et cetera. So they kind of have that broad experience of history, but it's only in patches. They're kind of skipping stones.
Right, but they also suffer gradual attrition too, don't they? Because they're brought out for missions, and then every once in a while one of them will die, and so gradually they're
and
the past.
The second book, without giving too much away, deals more with that, because we see more of those soldiers brought back into action together, and then we get a bit more perspective. So both of us were able in the second book to kind of color in the universe and the experience of our characters, but also the way the society works in that area of space too. So yeah.
Right. And Andre, your character was more in the past, but more closely linked to the present. So what interested you in the sort of, I guess it was cryogenic character from 20 to 40 years ago?
You're assuming there was some great forethought in this. This is the other thing too. Just
you've got to learn how to pretend.
Sorry. I'm a pantser and Pete's a plotter, so I get an idea and think, oh yeah, if we do that and that and that, okay, I'm just going to start writing. Whereas Pete's got scenes and chapters sorted out before he even puts pen to paper, so to speak. In a way, if I was going to analyze it, it might be the fact that it's a link it's like us trying to understand something in the far future. She's from a past, okay, it's not as distant as what we are, but she's from an environment where a lot of this stuff is new to her, and so she's coming to terms with the way things are. And so in a way, a link to as a reader being thrown from 21st century Earth into, what would that be, 51st century space travel type stuff. So yes, we are used to reading science fiction books, so we get a grasp of it, but I suppose it's inherently one of those, it's my subconscious working, I think. It's that link from past to future.
Right. That's quite interesting actually, because you've got the let's say more recent past character who
Yeah.
is kind of representing the reader being introduced to this new world.
Mhm.
And she knows some of the world, but like 40 years. So like we say, if we go back 40 years, it'd be quite significantly different.
Yep.
But interestingly, Pete's characters, who are thousands of years old potentially, they're the ones who are linking us to the, let's say, cycle of history. So they're actually feeling less new to the world than the more recent character. It's quite interesting.
Again, you're assuming I had some plan.
It's subconscious.
Yep.
Yeah.
I find that's
So
an interesting observation. I really like that actually. Yep.
I just made it up.
you can print out the transcript afterwards and use it.
It's better for audio than me going, oh, I don't know.
Exactly. So I was curious. I mean, the faster than light. I'm glad you did talk a little bit about that, because that's always an issue you have with sort of space opera, military sci-fi, isn't it? You've got to get people around the galaxy. You more or less have to have some kind of faster than light. Was there, again, I'm getting the impression that it was sort of instinctive, but was there, did you look much at different types of FTL, or did you just go, hyperspace, let's go with Star Wars kind of thing?
We just went with hyperspace.
Yeah.
Because
It's
we
a
just
given. I mean, we have faster than light travel in all the science fiction books. You might call it something different, but it's all there. And obviously, you can't explain how it works because it doesn't, or we don't know how it works. So you gloss over that. Yes, we have hyperspace. Next, you know,
Yeah, I think so we had the comment earlier on soft versus hard sci-fi, and I think probably this is the one point that will tell you whether it's soft or hard sci-fi, isn't it? Is especially
yes, sir.
yeah,
yeah,
the
where
detail.
we looked very carefully at science was the physics of movement, particularly in zero G.
Okay.
So there are a lot of scenes where we've very carefully back and forth with, yeah, but if that happens, what's the reaction to, to him throwing that thing? So he throws it, he's going to go in the opposite direction, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. If you've got a powered vehicle that's attached to a rail, then if the power cuts out, then the rail will potentially slow it down because it's got that friction. Yeah. So even though there's no, when I say there's not much science, we did look very carefully at things. We've got a zero G hand-to-hand combat scene that once again I think I wrote nearly all of it, but I kept going back to Andre, who's much more the scientist than I am, just to say, does it make sense? What would happen here, to make sure we got that right. So yeah, we're very careful. But the hyperspace was very much
just do it.
Yeah.
I suppose the only difference is that I made the limitations of the way stations and space is, as they say, mind-bogglingly big, and things can happen that we wouldn't see. And if we're traveling, at faster than light speeds, well, you wouldn't see it. You just go blap. So I thought, being a sailor, we have lighthouses to protect ships or to deter ships from coming a certain direction. So I thought, with space being the way it is, that we perceive it anyway, if you have these way stations, they're communicating through hyperspace communication relays, which is faster, obviously, that the ships can be warned of certain anomalies and without actually stopping and starting can divert a ship to another. So the way station, and again, none of this is really written in the books. It's just one of those unwritten things. The way station will then communicate with the navigational computer and say, you're going to deviate. And then it'll go to another way station and that'll change them so that's like a automatic detour.
So I definitely like that idea, sort of expanding on the Star Wars hyperspace a bit, because one of the issues in Star Wars was, if you don't make the calculations correctly, you'll jump into a star or something. In this case, it's with the way stations, it's a bit nicer because you don't have to worry about that as much, at least in settled space.
And we're still a step up from Star Trek, where it just
Yeah, of course.
you can fly back from Kronos to Earth in an hour in one movie, but then it'll take you a week in another movie.
But we haven't got transporter beams or replicators. So I suppose again, unwritten, you could argue that all the little internal conflicts throughout the empire has sort of reduced the ability to do R&D in certain areas. So that's what I'm going to stick with that.
Right. So on Pete's comment, then, did you spend a bit of time trying to figure out how long it will take to go certain distances to be consistent within your world building?
Don't think we did. I can't remember.
I think you did?
No, I don't think we did. But I think just piggybacking what Andre said, I think we kind of also had an unwritten law that there were pockets of the galaxy where people were richer and had better technology. So there were the haves and have-nots. So a core military ship with a commander that's close to the emperor's heart is likely to have a barely top of the line ship. Yeah. Whereas someone on the outer reaches might have just patched their ship together from other ships, and it doesn't work as well.
Yeah, that felt like a nice homage to Star Wars in a way. The Millennium Falcon comes to mind, right? Patching up the hyperdrive and everything. Yeah.
So having a hyperdrive it means you can do hyperspace travel, but not all hyperdrives are the same. So you can have it's like you have a car, right? Can have a 100cc car, a 100cc motor. We can have, an 8-liter motor. And so obviously there's good and bad in having both, fuel economy and that sort of stuff. But basically, poorer people, less developed worlds will have less developed hyperdrives, less accurate, and navigational computers too, maybe less accurate. Whereas the richer, more developed worlds would have the better items.
I feel like I should have a fun panel discussion on the podcast at some point, bring in the people who are developing their own FTL and have them hash out how it might work in real life.
Me too.
That would be quite
I'd be
fun.
fascinated by that.
Yeah.
I'm always curious about the when, like, you had it break down in your story, and I'm really curious. It triggered the memory. Well, not the memory. Maybe the memory. It triggered the thought of what happens to the poor souls who actually get stranded way out in the middle of nowhere and they can't fix their hyperdrive.
Well, it wouldn't be an issue because I've got Braddon, the mechanical or engineer extraordinaire. He's a turns out to be he's a hyperdrive specialist. Lucky for them.
So
whereas my team better hope there's a very clever droid on board to fix it, because they haven't got any clue about that stuff.
Right. I guess we're getting towards the end. I wanted to ask you sort of one more question just about humanity expanding into the galaxy, because you've got like 5,000 years. You've got the Martianist Imperium. You have the Terranists they were battling against, and then you have you've commented specifically on heavy G trained people or people from heavy G environments. I guess, how am I going to phrase this? Because I mean, I'm quite interested in, one of the things is when we go out if we go out into the galaxy, I mean, humanity will change dramatically, because the environment that we'll be living on in each planet will change us. Have you explored that a lot in your series yet? I mean, other than the high G stuff. And do you envision, or have you envisioned, let's say, non-terrestrial species, like let's say not originated from humans, or are they all sort of human variants?
If I may, because of evolution takes hundreds of thousands of years, when we're colonizing, not all planets are the same, obviously, and you're not going to find another Earth-like planet that is necessarily identical in gravitational or environmental climatic conditions. So, bearing in mind that we're only doing only 5,000 year difference, the augmentations or the changes are purely done surgically, I suppose, through other technologies, whether it be modifying DNA or geaming, corpy forming, that's genetically modifications, or some nanite type scenario.
We decided early on that we wanted a galaxy that didn't have aliens in it. It was just us. So we had carte blanche, but then that meant we had to, as you say, we had to adapt to. So part of our history was that we'd only found a handful of Earth compatible or Earth-like sort of Goldilocks worlds, and that was where the Terranists tended to go. They philosophically opposed to any kind of body modification at all. So they wanted something that was as close to Earth as possible. Whereas the split was that the people who'd colonized Mars, they were like, no, whatever it takes. Right. We're going to get out there and take this galaxy for ourselves. So, yeah, that was where we kind of drew that line for ourselves.
Yeah, I personally feel that probably as we go out there, evolution will maybe happen a bit faster than it does on Earth, just because the environments are much more extreme. But what's interesting, well, I'm curious about too, is you have the Martianists and the Terranists, and you've just explained sort of one ideological difference. Do you vision them, like you call them the Martianists? So was it originally, do they originate from a colony on Mars then? Is that how they started?
Yes.
Yes. Short answer.
Well, I suppose in my case, Alexis is, out of my group, Alexis is the only Martian, or the Martianist. She was the only one out of my group that was born and raised on Mars, and the reasons of why she's here comes out in Origins. But Braden, Sabria, Philip were all born within the realms of the Imperium.
And early on in our history, we decided that there would be that split between, colonies that had been established on Mars, taking the lead in space exploration, and then eventually Earth kind of catching up, but not quite ever catching up. So that eventually it just got absorbed into that Martianist Imperium. Right. In fact, in one of the books we kind of talked about, it might have been in one of the prequel short stories that we've been dabbling with, we kind of talked about the fact that Martianist wasn't really a Martianist word. It was a word that had been applied to them during the Civil War. They just thought of themselves as humans.
Well, as you call them, Terranists, Martianists would be the obvious allegory.
Have you worked out the early stages of expansion from Earth, or you just wanted to go with the simple side?
Yeah, we just wanted to get into what was happening there. Yeah. One of, I'm trying to think who said it, but another author said only do as much work, something along the lines of only do as much world building as you need to. Then you don't lock yourself in. And you kind of, I've seen that when I was playing around with some fantasy stories early on, where I would draw the map first, and then I'd be stuck with the map. And I'd think, but my characters have to get there in a day. But the way I've drawn the map, it's a week on horseback. So yeah, so not kind of locking yourself in. So apart from being a little bit lazy, we've just stuck with what we needed to tell the stories we wanted to tell.
Right, because you can kind of see if things go the way it's looking at the moment, like they might. You can see a potential ideological split coming in that way, right, between Mars and Earth. If, let's say, Mars becomes settled by the Elon Musk cohort, which is largely corporate based, then you could definitely see a split already coming. So you might be more prophetic than you think.
Humans are very dividing off into tribes.
Yeah, well, exactly. And it's bound to happen, isn't it? If we start settling, well, we're already in tribes, so it's going to happen even more if we separate ourselves by vast distances. It can't not happen.
True.
So Yeah, so I'll just move on to the big question then. We'll finish with um, so you do have a galactic civilization. We've been discussing it's entirely humanoid, originating from humans. But what I do dream of us getting to a state of some kind of galactic civilization. I would love to be able to, move between the various planets and stars. But do you think we can get there? Let's say before we collapse.
Mm. I'd like to think so. Well, as you say, if we can do it before we collapse, different story. But yeah, we've got to get past the. I don't think it's going to happen quickly. I suppose if it's a government thing, we won't know about a lot of it. But if it's a corporate thing, as you say, Elon Musk, they make their money out of putting it out there, and getting sponsorship and stuff. You can't get sponsorship for stuff that no one knows about. So I think if it's going to, bit like also Virgin, if it's going to happen, it's going to happen through a corporate enterprise, which of course then the government will probably try to take over.
Your thoughts, Pete? Does that sound similar to what you're thinking?
Yeah, exactly. And I think the key thing was what you said was before we collapse. So, I'm hopeful that we'll do it. We're certainly capable of it, 100%. I guess the interesting logistical things will be how to make it sustainable in terms of how to keep pouring the resources into keeping the ships running and constructing the next piece of technology, etc., to move beyond the solar system and then make that repeatable, etc., etc. But yeah, we look at what we've done in 100 years, how far we've come. Yeah. My grandfather was born into a world that only barely had cars. The Wright brothers had just test flown, their thing. Yeah, and we've already been out into space multiple times. So yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting. The two ideas together, because I think what Andre was also suggesting maybe is, and together, like, okay, getting there with the corporations, but then Elon Musk, I mean, he faces a lot of pressure from various governments. So clearly he's got to be aware that if he gets a settlement there, he does have to figure out how to sustain it. So he's gonna have to put enough infrastructure in place very quickly that they can at least begin to become self-sustaining and self-sufficient before they lose support from Earth, right?
Yep. What's that saying? If you build it, they will come.
Yeah. Yeah. And they might, and then they might stop them from trying to stop them from coming, right? So that's one of the problems, yeah. Because I mean, it's gonna, the UN obviously is trying to set up rules for the settlement of space and the control of space, but that'll go out the window, I think, fairly quickly once it becomes some kind of reality, won't it?
It's actually something with that Envoys universe that you were talking about that I've developed. I have a couple of book ideas that happened earlier in that history, and that was one of the things I wanted to explore if I ever get around to it. As you say, multiple projects on the go, but yeah, exactly that idea of the horse has bolted and the UN trying to shut it down or get control over it, but it's too late. They're out there on another planet, and then another planet, and another planet, and these corporations become a lord of them unto themselves. It's their colony now. It's their rules. It's their law. It's their military. And yeah, it's stuff's happening.
If I may, an analogy is like the internet, because my daughter is got a master's in international law and cyber warfare. The internet started, and we all thought, "Oh, this is great," and it just snowballed so quickly that things were happening on the internet before legislation caught up. So if you think of space travel or colonizing space like the internet, things will happen so quickly that back on Earth, they're going to say, "Oh, hang on a second." No, too late, because if we waited for you guys, we'd be dead. So we have to implement this now. So you can catch up later.
That is what's happening, isn't it? The let's say the legacy media, the corporate media, whatever you want to call it, has realized that they're behind the game and they're losing. And they're
it's like AI. Suddenly, I mean, AI was only mentioned a couple of times in science fiction books, and well, a lot in science fiction books, but recently it's only been the last 2 or 3 years that AI is in the headlines all the time. And now
Yeah, it
you've
was
got some
interesting.
group in the UK that says they're going to publish something like 800 books or 8,000 books a month, AI based.
Yeah. Yeah. It's interesting to follow that AI pathway as well. You had sort of computers working with, chess games, trying to beat chess masters and Go masters. And then you started having them work on more complex projects. Once they sort of mastered that, then I think this was 2018, 2017, 2018, they worked on the protein folding problem. And then speaking of video games, as we were earlier, StarCraft 2, which is the key with StarCraft 2 that differs from chess and Go, is that there's fog of war built in. So it's much more realistic. And so you had them beating the masters at that. And then that was 2018. And then it's sort of like COVID happened, right? And so it went off the radar for a bit, come back, and like you say, then it just exploded, right? Just all of a sudden everywhere. And in the speech, text to speech is something that you can follow very quickly, because even in the last couple of years of incarnation, it was pretty obvious initially, right? It was pretty obvious. You could tell it was a computer. Now you mostly can't. The main reason you can tell is because the voices are the same voice, right? It's always the same voice. That's the main reason you can tell. Occasionally it makes a pronunciation error. But otherwise you can't even tell anymore.
Good.
So so the internet, AI, it's logarithmic. So it's the learning curve almost becomes a vertical line.
Right.
And I think it's the same way as people said about 100 years ago. We didn't have cars, or cars were just barely in existence, and now we've got rockets to go to the moon and to Mars. So again, it's early days, but I think space travel is going to be logarithmic. It's stepping stones to the moon, stepping stones to Mars, and then at some stage down the track, whether it be money thrown in or just more and more brains contemplating the possibilities, I think it's just going to, skyrocket. I think it's going to go up, assuming we survive.
Right, because one of the things that will drive that as well is literally the AI, isn't it? Now
True.
that we have AI to manage the massive amounts of data and find patterns where we can't find patterns, it'll put all this stuff together and it'll all accelerate as well, won't it? So on that note, then, what's our next step to get towards a galactic civilization?
Right.
Defer the question.
Yeah, I don't. I mean, because I'm not a scientist, I kind of my interests are more in historical things and humanities and cultural things and languages, and I think humanities history is sometimes very organized, but often very random and patchy. So I think that probably we'll be surprised by something, just as we have been with AI. Exactly what you were saying. It almost came out of nowhere, even though it didn't. But there are things building, at the moment that will eventually contribute to something that drives us out into space and makes that sustainable, that maybe we can't see what they are yet, or maybe the Joe public like me can't see what they are because I'm not privy to that higher information. But yeah, I think there'll just be some random leaps that'll surprise us, and probably some of it will happen independently of other things that are happening. So again, there may be multiple tracks out into space that happen at different times or concurrently.
Right. That's interesting that you're interested in history. It made me think of because the Iconic is in your series is a highly advanced ship, much more so than many of the characters have experienced before, and it's from the distant past. And it made me think of the monuments we have on Earth, right? The ancient monuments that we are flabbergasted at how, from our understanding of history, they could have possibly built stuff like that, right? And it's really interesting to sort of think that through towards the future and how future people will look back. Because even now, with our infrastructure failing, it's very common to look back and say, "Oh, we used to have machines like a washing machine that would last for 20 years, and now they last like 3 to 5 years, right, before they fall apart." So it's very interesting to think of that type of thing as well.
Yeah,
Well,
100%.
there was a phrase, I can't remember the actual wording, but there was a phrase that they determined, or they put into that, inbuilt not redundancy, but they were designed to fail.
Yeah.
You build something and it lasts 20 years and everyone buys one, well, you've got no more sales for 20 years. So let's break it. Let's design it so it'll break. And
Yeah, designed obsolescence or something like that.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. So that just creates the corporate or capitalism of
right.
Buy.
And that potentially takes us into a whole dark place of how are they going to do net zero if the entire corporate and economic structure is based on
buying everything,
machines breaking down all the time.
recycle.
Yeah. So final part of this question is which something that I'm quite interested in, because it's very easy to approach these issues and say, oh, well, we need faster than light drive. We need all these structures for colonizing. What's the next non-technological hurdle we have to overcome for us to move out into the galaxy?
Space colonization, I think it would be some of the biological ones, wouldn't it? Because we get onto a planet that doesn't suit our circadian rhythms, for instance. Yep. How's the human body going to cope with that? You know, if again, as has been discussed a million times, but if a human has to undergo a 4-year at best trip to the nearest star system, how are they going to cope physically and mentally, psychologically with that? So probably some of those things. Or do we outsource those things to AI and to robots? Yeah.
Talking out of my backside here, because I've got no real ideas. Far Northern Hemisphere, for instance, where they've got daylight for some parts, almost in summer, all day. So there is no nighttime. So how do those cultures survive the circadian rhythm? Yes, we're used to, roughly 10 to 12 hours of daylight in summer and winter, and it varies slightly. But when you've got a culture that's grown for hundreds, thousands of years in an environment where 6 months of the year, it's basically all day or it's all night, how have they coped? And maybe there'll be someone will look into that and then try to adapt that to potential colonists going to a world where the rhythm is different. I think stasis or hypersleep, whatever you want to call it, is probably going to be something that's going to be done sooner than faster than light travel. I mean, we've got cryogenics as it is. It's not on a massive scale, obviously, but because it's so expensive. But you've got people who have decided that they'll be cryogenically frozen, so that when there's a cure for whatever ails them is found, that they would be revived and then cured.
Yeah, I guess the question is, does it actually work yet? In that regard, we don't really know, do we? Because I don't think anyone's been brought back from.
Yeah. True.
Yeah. One thing, us all being men on this panel, this discussion, we may have not paid attention necessarily to one of the biggest challenges we might face, which is continuation of the species on low G planets. We don't have any idea, do we, how the birthing process will be affected, the gestation period. Will we be able to have children? Will they be natural? This is one of the reasons why I think that evolution will accelerate on extraterrestrial worlds, because the conditions in the womb will be significantly different if we use a womb. Are all our kids going to be born artificially from now on, for example? How will that affect society, right? So these are huge.
That's an interesting one, because I haven't seen any discussion. Maybe I'm just not reading the right books. But yeah, I haven't seen any discussion on that particular topic. It's an interesting one.
Yeah. Okay. I can only when we have people coming back from the space station because they've got muscle attrition, but they're not using it so much. I suppose if you were in the future, if you were born on a planet with the different gravitational field, then I suppose from the moment you are born, your body is subjected to that. So it will you'll either adapt or you will die, I suppose, as an infant. So your muscle structure will probably be slightly different, or you might be shorter. Your bone density might change, or you'll just have a lot of fractures.
Because I suspect even from the 9 months in the womb, like the fetus is subjected to all these differences. High G, for some reason, seems easier to process than low G. I think we could sort of extrapolate high G, like you say, being shorter, stockier, stronger. What happens in lower G? Like, let's say you go to 0.5 G or less. Like space stations, maybe they're not. Like we go to, like you mentioned, the International Space Station. We don't have proper artificial gravity, so they're still going to atrophy, because even doing exercise, it doesn't have the same effect of pushing on every part of their body at the same time, does it? So they're strengthening, but they're still losing potentially bone density unless they're actually have that whole force on them. So it's really something I think we got to start thinking about.
The Expanse sort of touched on that a little bit. I mean, there was a lot of talk about the differences between gravities, but there was that time when that fellow terrorist or whatever was captured and brought to Earth. He was portrayed as like taller and thinner,
Right.
apart from the fact that he couldn't handle the gravity. But he was born out in space, I believe. He was one of the belters, so he had barely any gravitational forces against him. Apart from this is what so this is what I don't understand then, and one of the nuances, I suppose, of science fiction. If they've got, and it's not just the Expanse, but you've got someone who's born on Earth, they're used to one gravity, they can experience 0 G, but when they get to a belter space station, for instance, suddenly they're subjected to a gravity and they're not affected. I mean, if you're 1 G and you're going to a half G in scenario, you're a bit like Superman. You're much stronger. Your normal walking pace, unless you've been trained, your walk will suddenly, you'll go leaps and bounds because your muscle is saying, it's muscle memory. It's like, have you ever put your clutch foot on the brake? You know it's a brake, but you suddenly slam on the brake, even though you don't intend to, because that's what you do with the clutch. So when you're used to walking 1 G and you go to a half G, then your normal walk will propel you a lot further. A bit like you saw on the moon, where there's strides that were like bunny hopping. So I think they haven't touched on that too much with the various gravities. I have. It's the iconic, sorry, not the iconic, my the Malleus, which is the Serenity version, that's geared for about 6 G, because for whatever reason, all my characters are high gravity world characters. And well, Alexis wasn't, but she was modified to be a high gravity world character. In fact, in one of my origin books, which stories with Sabria, she uses that. She's used to 6 G. She's on a 1 G ship. Someone's attacking her, and she ends up changing it from 1 G down to 6 G and flattens them. So yeah, there's certain things that we haven't really dealt with space or science fiction. But yes, if you're born on a planet, chances are your body will adapt far quicker.
Yeah, it does bring to mind one thing that I've gone through recently now that I've entered my 50s, I'm about mid 50s now, that I experienced, which might make transportation between planets very ageist, is let's say accelerated atrophy, basically. when you really got to do a lot of exercising regularly to not atrophy, I think. I find, because I've been very sedentary, and the COVID messed me up a lot, just because of my bad habits that I got into during COVID. Yeah, so that's something interesting. Anyway, I think we're about out of time. It's been a fascinating discussion. Before we go, perhaps you could sort of let us know what you guys have each coming up next. If you'll be at any upcoming events and where we might find you online.
Go first, Pete.
I'll go first. So petealdin.com is the easiest place to find me. The big thing I have coming out next year is my first epic fantasy, which will be released primarily through Kickstarter to begin with some exclusive content. There'll be some hardback editions of that are only available through Kickstarter. And I've had Jeff Brown doing the artwork, and Jeff's an amazing artist. So a book I've been working on for about 14 years. So it better be good. So about 5 editors, a lot of great authors, people who in the beginning were just tooling around like me, who've gone on to great things. Had some input into this book. So I'm really excited about finally setting it free in the wild. Yep.
Excellent.
For myself, only nothing definite yet. We've got some of the sequels for the Outer Reaches series. I've still got 2 more books in the Deathwave Chronicles to write. I can't do any because I'm in France and I'm not here for tax reasons. I can't really do any fairs, and I'm not fluent in French anyway. So I'd like to think that I could get to the UK and do some of the book fairs there once I worked out what sort of visa I need to get, one of those entrepreneur type visas, I think. But otherwise, it's just through Amazon and what people buy online. Other stuff I've got going, apart from the 2 sequels, well, the 4 sequels I just mentioned, I'm working on another epic fantasy. It's sort of Game of Thrones meets Black Sails meets Wheel of Time. So women pirates, great stuff.
Okay, excellent. You'll have to let me know if you decide to come to the EasterCon in the UK this year. I haven't been for a while, but might if you come, I might go over and maybe we can meet up.
Cool, that'd be great. Just waiting for Peter to come to the other side of the planet now.
Yeah, exactly.
We're a long way away, man. A long way away.
So, Peter J Aldin and AJ Gordon, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you, Edwin. It's been great.
Thanks for having me.
And thank you for listening. Information and links related to this and all episodes are available at alternatefutures.co.uk. I'm also over at Substack under Alternate Futures, where I post articles on science fiction, socio-technological issues, and futurism. You can subscribe for free or sign up for a paid account if you'd like to support the podcast. If you've enjoyed this episode, why not share it with friends, writers, and other sci-fi fans you know? And if there are any indie sci-fi creators you'd like to see featured, send me a message at podcast@alternatefutures.co.uk. Once again, I'd like to thank you for listening, and I hope you'll join me on the next episode.
This is the future. Human error. Evolution. This is the future.